Welcome back to the deep dive. We are looking at a stack of research today that, quite honestly, it flips the script on how we usually talk about artificial intelligence.
It really does.
Normally when we sit down to discuss the future of AI, we're looking at the brain. We're talking about parameters, large language models, who has the smartest chatbot.
Or which algorithm can write better poetry, right?
Right.
It's all very abstract, magical.
Exactly, it's the output. But we have a new report on the desk today. It's fresh from February 11th, 2026, that suggests we're looking at the wrong end of the horse.
Yeah.
This is an InfoQ analysis of a major report from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the CNCF. And the argument here is that the future of AI isn't really about the code anymore. It's about the plumbing.
It's about the plumbing. Specifically, it's about a piece of tech that most people, I think, associate with boring IT maintenance, not cutting-edge intelligence.
We're talking about Kubernetes.
We are. And I know as soon as I say that word, half the audience probably envisions a server room and a headache.
Oh, for sure.
But the CNCF report is making a very bold claim. It's saying Kubernetes has graduated. It's no longer just a tool for keeping web apps running. It has effectively become the operating system for the global AI surge.
The phrase they used was the primary engine powering the global surge in artificial intelligence development. I mean, that is a massive promotion for a tool that, let's be honest, is notoriously difficult to manage.
It is.
So our mission today is to figure out why this shift is happening. We need to unpack why cloud-native AI is suddenly the industry standard, why these expensive GPUs are forcing companies to change everything, and this is the part that really surprised me, why the biggest roadblock to AI right now isn't the technology at all.
It's the people.
It's the people.
It's always the people, isn't it? But yes, this report highlights a critical friction point. You have this hyper-advanced machinery, Kubernetes, AI models, and it's colliding with organizational structures that haven't changed in, 20 years?
Let's start with the machinery, though. I want to understand the why here. As I said, most people think of Kubernetes as a container orchestrator. You put your website in a container, Kubernetes makes sure it stays on. Why does AI, which is this fluid, probabilistic thing, need that kind of rigid structure?
It really comes down to two main factors: scarcity and complexity. Let's start with scarcity.
Okay.
In the traditional web world, computing power CPUs is relatively cheap. If you have a web server sitting idle at 3 a.m., it's not a tragedy. It costs pennies.
Right.
But AI runs on GPUs. And in 2026, high-end GPUs like the H100s or the newer Blackwell chips are incredibly expensive. They're like the gold dust of the tech world.
So you can't afford to have them napping.
You absolutely cannot. If you have a cluster of GPUs costing you thousands of dollars an hour, and they're sitting at 10% utilization because a model finished training and nobody queued up the next job, you are lighting money on fire. The report highlights dynamic resource allocation as the critical need here.
Dynamic resource allocation. Okay, that sounds like corporate speak. What does it actually look like in the server room?
Think of it like a game of high-stakes Tetris. There's this concept called bin packing. So without an orchestrator like Kubernetes, you might have a researcher, let's call her Alice, who reserves a massive GPU to train her model. She runs the training, but then she goes to lunch or she stops to analyze the results.
But she's still holding that GPU.
She is. It's unavailable to anyone else, but it's doing zero work.
And meanwhile, Bob is just waiting in a queue, unable to work.
Exactly. Kubernetes changes the game. It treats the GPUs as a fluid pool. It looks at the incoming jobs, Alice's training run, Bob's data processing, and it slots them into the available hardware instantly. The second Alice's job finishes, Kubernetes rips that resource away and gives it to Bob. It packs the bin perfectly.
So there's no wasted space, no wasted time.
Zero.
So it turns a static parking lot into a high-speed valet service.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with the costs we're talking about with AI infrastructure, that efficiency isn't just nice to have. It's the difference between being profitable and going bankrupt.
Okay, so that covers the cost. But the report also mentioned hardware abstraction. Now, to me, abstraction usually just means making things vaguer. Why is that a benefit here?
Well, in this context, abstraction means hiding the mess.
Hiding the mess. I like that.
You have to remember that AI hardware is really messy. You have different vendors, NVIDIA, AMD, maybe some custom Google TPUs. You have different driver versions, different cooling requirements. In the old days, and by old days I mean like 3 years ago, a developer had to know exactly what physical machine they were running on.
They had to code specifically for that one box.
Yes, and that sounds like a nightmare if you ever want to move that code to the cloud.
It breaks everything.
It does. Kubernetes provides a layer that sits on top of all that hardware. It basically tells the developer, look, I don't care what chip is underneath, I will present you with a standard interface. It allows the AI models to be portable. You can write the code once and run it on your laptop, a massive server farm, or a cloud provider without rewriting all the plumbing.
Which brings us to that quote in the article from Chris Eneslake, the CTO of the CNCF. He said, Kubernetes is no longer a niche tool. It's a core infrastructure layer supporting scale, reliability, and increasingly AI systems. It sounds like he's staking the claim that K8s is the new operating system.
He is, and he makes a really interesting distinction about inference capacity. He calls this the next great cloud-native workload.
I want to pause on that term, inference. We hear training and inference thrown around all the time. Can we just quickly clarify the difference for anyone who isn't a machine learning engineer?
Yeah, absolutely. So training is the act of teaching the AI. It's like sending a student to university. It takes a long, long time. It's intense. It consumes a massive amount of energy, but you only do it once or, periodically. Inference is the graduate going out and getting a job.
Yeah.
It's the AI actually doing the work. Every time you type a prompt into a chatbot and it gives you an answer, that is inference.
So training is building the brain. Inference is using the brain.
That's it.
Correct.
And here's the shift. As AI matures, companies are doing less training and more inference. If you have a product with 10 million users, you might train the model once a month, but you are running inference 10 million times a day. And that requires a completely different kind of scale.
And that's where Kubernetes flexes its muscles.
Right. Because web traffic or inference traffic is unpredictable. Maybe everyone logs on at 9:00 a.m. You need to spin up 1,000 copies of that model instantly to handle the load and then shut them down at 10 a.m. when things quiet down.
Yeah.
Kubernetes was literally born to do that kind of auto-scaling. It's why the CNCF is arguing that K8s is the natural home for AI in production.
So the technology is robust. The plumbing is solid.
Yeah.
We have the valet service for the GPUs. We have the auto-scaling for the users. Everything should be working perfectly, but the report says it's not.
No, not at all. In fact, it identifies this massive bottleneck.
The report states that while the technical capabilities are highly mature, the real barriers are human and organizational factors.
And this is the part of the deep dive where we stop looking at servers and we start looking at org charts.
They cite a finding from Puppet, a big player in automation, that says rigid hierarchies and siloed structures are a top 3 blocker. Now, every company has silos. Marketing doesn't talk to engineering. Sales doesn't talk to HR. Why is a silo specifically dangerous for AI?
Because AI requires a continuous loop. In a traditional software company, okay, you might have a dev team that writes code and an ops team that runs the servers. They can hand things off. It's fine.
Yeah.
But in AI, you have a data scientist and a platform engineer, and they're practically different species.
Give me an example of how that clash actually happens.
Okay, so picture a data scientist. Their goal is accuracy. They live in a world of experimentation. They usually work in something called a Jupyter notebook. It's basically a digital scratch pad where you can run snippets of code, visualize data, tweak models on the fly. It's messy, it's creative, and it's completely unstructured.
It's a laboratory.
It is a laboratory. Now, picture the platform engineer or the DevOps person. Their goal is stability. They care about security, uptime, efficiency. They work with rigid configuration files, usually YAML. They need things to be reproducible and locked down.
Oh boy, I can see the train wreck coming.
It is.
Yeah.
The data scientist finishes a model in their messy notebook and says, it's done. It's 99% accurate. They throw that notebook over the wall to the platform engineer and say, put this in production.
And the platform engineer just looks at it like,
this isn't software. This is a mess. I can't scale this. I can't secure this. This will not run on Kubernetes.
And because of the silos?
Because of the silos, they don't solve it together. They open tickets. Ticket number 501, model failed to deploy. Ticket 502, infrastructure is too rigid. It creates what the report calls this growing gap. You have a Ferrari engine, the Kubernetes infrastructure, but the driver and the mechanic refuse to speak the same language.
So the report calls for cross-functional collaboration and closer alignment. That feels a bit like a buzzword bingo card. What does the CNCF actually want these companies to do? Force the data scientists to learn Kubernetes?
That's the danger, right? Kubernetes is notoriously complex. If you force a brilliant mathematician to spend their day writing YAML configuration files to manage pod restarts, they're going to quit.
That's not alignment, that's just burden shifting.
Exactly. The solution the report points toward is a kind of middle layer teams that sit between the two.
A translator.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
You see the rise of AI platform teams. These are groups that build internal tools so the data scientist can just say, I need a GPU, and the system handles all the Kubernetes complexity in the background. But to build that, you need the operations people and the data people to sit in the same room and agree on how the plumbing should work.
And the report says this culture shift is the decisive factor.
It's the difference between a science fair project and a real business.
Hmm.
The report pretty much implies that if you don't fix this culture, you stay in the experimental pilot phase forever. You never reach production-grade deployment.
Which is where the money is.
That's where the money is.
I want to look at the competitive landscape now. Because despite all this complexity we're talking about, the report mentions an adoption rate of 82% for Kubernetes orchestration in production. That's dominant. Staggering.
It's effectively the standard. If you were building modern infrastructure today, you were using Kubernetes.
But it's not the only option. The source material brings up the proprietary stacks from the hyperscalers. We're talking about Amazon SageMaker, Google Vertex AI, Azure Machine Learning. These tools promise to solve exactly the problem we just talked about. They hide all that complexity.
They do, and they are compelling. If you use SageMaker, you don't really need to worry about the underlying Kubernetes cluster. Amazon just handles it. It's smooth, it's integrated, it lets you move fast.
So why isn't everyone using them? Why would you go through all the pain of building your own platform if Amazon has already done it for you?
2 words: vendor lock-in.
The trap.
The trap. The report notes that these proprietary tools provide a more integrated experience, but it comes at a cost. Once you build your entire AI workflow around Vertex AI's specific APIs and their specific way of handling data, you are married to Google.
And if they raise their prices next year?
You pay it. If they deprecate a feature you rely on, you scramble. Moving off those platforms is incredibly difficult.
And that explains the other statistic that jumped out at me. 37% of organizations are leveraging multiple cloud providers.
That number is higher than I would have guessed, and it tells a really interesting story about risk management.
They're hedging their bets.
They are. By using Kubernetes, they are maintaining vendor neutrality. Because Kubernetes is open source, it works the same way on AWS as it does on Google Cloud. So if you build your app on Kubernetes, you can, in theory, just pick it up and move it to a different cloud provider if the business terms change. It's your insurance policy.
There was also a quick mention of bare metal. I thought we were done with physical servers. I thought the cloud ate everything. But the report says high-performance computing clusters on bare metal are a thing again.
For AI, absolutely. Remember the cost of those GPUs. When you rent them from a cloud provider, you are paying a premium. Plus, there is something called the virtualization tax. A tiny bit of performance is lost because the cloud provider's software sits between you and the actual hardware.
And when you're training a massive model for weeks.
That tiny loss adds up to millions of dollars and days of lost time.
So companies are buying their own racks again.
Some are. Or they're renting bare metal instances where there's no virtualization layer. And guess what they use to manage those physical servers?
Let me guess. Kubernetes.
Kubernetes. It's the universal adapter. Whether it's in the cloud, on your own server, or a hybrid of both, it provides that same API.
Let's look to the future. The report predicts we're going to see greater integration of specialized hardware and automated resource management. But I'm more interested in the developer experience part. We sort of touched on this with the silos.
Yes, the report explicitly states that the emphasis will shift toward simplifying the developer experience and lowering the barrier to entry.
Which is a nice way of admitting that the barrier is currently way too high.
Implicitly, yes. The industry is realizing that we can't expect every AI researcher to also become a systems engineer. It's not sustainable. We have to hide the plumbing deeper underground.
So the goal is to make Kubernetes invisible to the end user.
Exactly. It should just be the engine that hums in the background, reliably.
So if an enterprise can actually pull this off, if they can adopt the tech, fix the culture, simplify the experience, what's the payoff?
The report says they can leverage these investments to deliver robust and scalable artificial intelligence solutions. Basically, they win. They stop playing with AI and they start running their business on it.
It really reframes the whole AI conversation. We spend so much time talking about the brains, the models, but this report convinces me that the body, the infrastructure, and the organization, that's actually what determines success or failure.
Absolutely. You can have the smartest brain in the world, but if the nervous system is broken, you aren't going anywhere.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought to mull over. We talked about that 37% of companies fighting for independence by using multi-cloud strategies. And we have this tension, right? The walled gardens, SageMaker, Vertex, they're getting easier and easier to use. They're seductive. They solve the complexity problem instantly.
But they demand your freedom in exchange.
Exactly. And the open path, Kubernetes, it keeps you free, but it demands a cultural shift that is incredibly hard to pull off. It asks people to change how they work.
And humans hate changing how they work.
So here's the question for you to think about. Is the future of AI going to be defined by convenience or by independence? Can that cultural shift happen fast enough to make the open path viable for the average company? Or will the sheer difficulty of organizing human beings drive everyone into the arms of the tech giants simply because it's the path of least resistance?
That is the billion-dollar wager right now. Do you bet on your ability to change your culture, or do you bet on Amazon's ability to treat you fairly down the line?
Something to think about the next time you see a deploy to cloud button. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next one.